Hey, in this video we are going to focus on procedural shape generation. Everything we're going to need will be in this panel here. As a reminder, the idea is quite simple. We choose a noise here in the list. A noise is a mathematical function, and then we apply some transformation to this function using those parameters. I'm going to start with this part here. Those are the very general shape parameters, and they are very easy to understand because they don't involve any math. The first is the seed. You choose the number, you apply, and you get a different terrain. It's quite easy. You can put a number by hand, or you can ask the program to generate one for you. Then you apply, and you get a different terrain. The next one is the size of the terrain. So this number is just the number of voxels in a side of the large voxel cube. So 64, for example, means a cube that is 64 by 64 by 64 voxel. Knowing that one voxel is 1 meter long, this gives us a size of the terrain in meters. So for example, this terrain is 256 meters by 256 meters. Also, because of the way voxels are computed, this number can only be a power of 2, so we can only double it. We can't make a terrain, for example, 87 meters long. It has to be 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, and so on. Okay, powers of 2. The checkbox here is an important option to understand. It enables or disables the real-time computation of LODs. LOD stands for level of details, and when it's enabled, the terrain precision is adjusted in real time depending on the distance from the camera. Both options come with advantages and drawbacks. Disabled LODs means full precision but longer computation time and more memory consumed. It's the default option. And enabled LODs means faster and real-time computation but inconsistent precision. Let me illustrate this with the simple word I prepared. It's a three-dimensional Perlin noise used against a surface with a bit of frequency and height tuning. It took 1 minute to prepare, so it's very simple. Just for the eye candy, let's put it in space, because it's screaming space, obviously. You can see that this world contains a lot of details, and it's nice looking with no LOD, but took some time to compute. Now let's enable LOD and rebuild it. The results come instantly, but with a very low precision, and we have to get close to get some details, as you can see here. Okay, you can see the details, the terrain transforming as we are moving along. So this mode is really good and efficient for first-person games, but not really ideal for the type of games we are generally dealing with in YAG. So on the other hand though, it allows us to go full crazy with the size of the world. So let's try this. We're going to wait that the computation are finished, and you can see that in this mode the view is really quite something. Okay, so that's really impressive what's going on screen at the moment. But in spite of its impressive feature, I disabled it by default because in the kind of game mostly played in YAG, precision often tends to be much more important than size. So at least you know it's there, so the choice is yours. Now, oops, sorry, this one here, and let's come back to a blue sky. Okay, now we've got the offset here. This will simply change the origin of the noise, which will shift the terrain in a direction or another. We can think of it as coordinates in the infinite mathematical world that is the noise. Let's go LOD here to get instant results and show you this. For example, if we want to see what our world look like 50 meters on the right, we can put 50 in the y coordinates here and recompute. Okay, and we get our new view. As we move 50 meters to the right, you can see that the holes here was sent 50 meters to the left. Okay, because our point of view, our new origin is 50 meters to the right. So let's come back to 0 here, and of course this is pure math, so we are not limited to small numbers. So here is our world: 1 kilometers north and 500 meters east. Oops, 500. Okay, this world is completely coherent as long as we don't change the seed, of course. So we can use it to manage a campaign in a large world. We can draw maps, remember coordinates, prepare saves at special locations, and so on. Okay? The remaining options here are very easy to understand, and I'm going to load a preset to explain them. It's called Reaver. Okay, so this parameter here will simply limit the world to a slice of the cube. So -1 is the bottom of the cube and +1 is its top. So you can see that in this precept we get a very thin slice, but if we go full cube here, -1 to +1, and recompute, you can see that in fact we are using a three-dimensional noise to get what we want, which we are limiting to a small size here. Okay, now this parameter will invert matter and air, and in this case we'll turn the Reaver into a path. So I'm going to uncheck it because it was checked. Okay, and you can see that by default the noise gives us a path instead of a Reaver. Finally, this one, when checked, will force a ground at the bottom of the slice. You can see here that due to cutting the cubes, we have empty air at the place of the Reaver, and this is intended because we're supposed to put a water pond here to get some nice water instead of emptiness. But we can force a ground by checking this here and recomputing, and you can see that it could give a nice cave system. And in fact this is exactly what's happening in another precept that is called 2D cave system, I think. Yes, this one here. Okay, it's exactly the same stuff, the same thing, except I changed the materials and a different set of properties, but it's the same principle, and you can see that it would be a very nice lair for goblins or giant spider or anything. It's a very nice looking natural cave system. Okay, then we've got the two last parameters here, very straightforward. The first one here is the cubic rendering. So if you don't want a smooth rendering here, you can just check this parameter and rebuild, and you'll get a cubic rendering, which can be useful in some games sometime. Okay, of course by default it is unchecked, so we get a more natural looking terrain. And the last one here will complete or not the lower part of the terrain. It will close the box, so to speak. So it is checked by default, as you can see, and if I uncheck it and rebuild the world, then I will only get the surface but not the side of the cube below the surface. So some might prefer it. It's really a matter of taste. You can do as you want, it's your choice. By default it is enabled, so we get the full cube underneath the terrain. So we are done with the most generic options here. We are left with the right part of the UI, which are the real mathematical noise parameters. I'm not going to explain all of them, but I'll try to give you some intuitive ideas and leave you to experiment. The frequency here will set how frequently the noise repeats itself. Low frequency means monotonous, while high frequency means very irregular. So let's try that. You can see if I divide the frequency by 2, I get a more flat terrain, and if on the contrary, if I multiply it by 2, I get a more irregular terrain. Okay, let's come back to 1. And this parameter here inverts the sign of the noise. Its effects are less predictable because they strongly depend on the other parameters, but it's really easy to test, so I leave it there for you to experiment without any further explanation. The height is very easy. It's the height, so you put it to 0, you get a flat terrain. You put it to 50 meters, you get mountains. Okay, and well, the default for this terrain was 30, I think. This one here will change the proportion of horizontal ground. It can do it by preserving the holes in the ground or by putting everything upward. So if we just click here, you can see that we will get more horizontal, more flat terrain, but holes remain holes. And if we use this option here, you can check with this hole that holes will become hills. Okay? It has become a hill. And this number here represents the strength of this effect. So for this parameter here, we are going to need a 3-dimensional noise. So let's take a 3D Perlin noise. It is hidden somewhere here, and apply. To make things clearer, I'll also decrease the octave number, which I'll describe later on in a few moments actually. So we get this roundy 3-dimensional structure. Well, this parameter here sets a limit to the amount of matter allowed in the world. So for instance, if I go 0, 1, you can see that the matter part of the structure will become membranes. So this could make interesting natural path, you know, adding octaves and so on. Another interesting stuff can be done by coupling this effect with other effects. For example, if we invert matter and air, we can get some nice galleries here in our cube. Okay, right. This parameter here is selecting a rule to transform the noise into a fractal noise. How it works is way beyond the scope of this video, but very roughly, a fractal noise is created by adding the noise to itself multiple times and modifying the frequency each time. So depending on how we transform everything at each iteration, we will get different results. I'll give you a tool at the end of the video that will allow you to very easily test those options. Next is the number of octaves. This is the number of times the noise is added to itself to create the fractal noise. So with a small number, we will generally get some round pattern. Let's try with one here. Okay, and when increasing it, the structure, as you saw, will become more sharp and realistic. Okay, typical use of a small number of octaves is for cartoon setup, like the one we have here, or you can see that the roundy hills work very well with the general feel of the meshes and round trees and so on here. Okay, so you can see this is a low octave Perlin noise, and it would be much less nice with a more realistic kind of terrain, as you can see. Okay, it doesn't work as well, obviously. Okay, next are the options for cellular noise. Again, I'm not going to explain those. They are just different types of mathematical functions, difficult to explain without using math, but we'll see how to easily explore them at the end of the video. Let me just say you'll find example of cellular noise in the sand dune desert here, and also in the hilly plains there. Okay, so the cellular noise, it's the same noise with just different options, and as you can see, the cellular noise is a pretty rich one to explore. It's got a lot of options and can gain very interesting and very different and original results. And finally, we can apply some perturbation to our terrain. Let's take our 2D terrain here and add some perturbation to it. So, for example, a strength of 30. And we got some very nice and realistic patterns because it sort of transformed the noise into a fluid, and at very large scales of space and time, rocks on Earth behave a bit like fluids, and this is what this perturbation simulates and why it works so well. We have three parameters for the perturbation: its strength here, its frequency, and octaves. Again, I'm not going into those. Hopefully you now get an idea of what frequency is, and also octaves, and obviously you can experiment. So you can see there are lots and lots and lots of possibilities. We can spend hours testing them, but there is a nice tool I'd like to speak about before ending this video. I didn't write the voxel engine I'm using in YAG, and this engine relies on an open source library to generate its noises. So if you go into the YAG documentation directory, okay, my documents, my game, YAG documentation, voxel here, you will see two files. The first one is a README file that will contain some links to the voxel engine I'm using and to its fractal library, so you can read and anything you want and learn anything you want on those two amazing tools. And you'll also find a small app here that is freely distributed with the library, and that will let us preview and test all the noises and their parameters. All you have to know when using this tool is that in YAG those will be height maps, so white is up and black is down, and knowing that, you can just experiment with the with the noise. So let's try a Perlin noise here. You can see how it looks like. We can add some fractal perturbations, and you can see what I was telling you about the perturbation transforming the noise into a sort of fluid-like simulation. Okay, and generally you will not get lost. You will not be lost with those parameters. They are exactly the same that are exposed in here. You can see general fractal cellular perturbation, general fractal cellular and perturbation here. Okay, obviously because it's the same library. So it's a very nice tool to experiment and to get acquainted with those noise and parameters. Alright, I think this is the end of this video, so thanks for watching and hopefully see you in the next. Bye!